What if I told you that you are living in an invisible box that controls almost everything you think, feel, and do? And no, it's not some weird government thing. This is why so many people feel stuck. So many people feel trapped in a life that's too small for them, but they don't know how to change. I've got news for you. You're not actually stuck. You are hiding. It's not society. It's not even your boss or your family. It's you. And you don't even know that you're doing it. By the end of this video, you will have a radical new understanding of what it is that is really keeping you stuck. You'll see the invisible box that you've been living in, and you will have a couple tools to begin taking brave new steps forward to a new intentional life. What if I told you that the life you are living right now was not actually designed by you? From the very moment you were born, you have been imprinted with literally millions of ideas, of concepts, of beliefs that have been sent at you in a barrage of never-ending information telling you who you are, what your role is, how the world works, what people think. Your society, your culture, your family, they all more or less shaped you to fill a certain role. And now, the astute listener might observe that I opened this video by saying that the thing controlling you is not your society or your family or your culture, and here I just said you have been shaped by your family, your society, and your culture, and you are the one keeping yourself stuck. This might seem slightly contradictory. There was a time in most of our lives where we were factually limited and constrained by our society, by our culture, by our belief systems, and our family. And not all of this conditioning is inherently bad. But as we grow up, a subtle shift occurs where we take what were once externalized beliefs, value systems, and we begin to internalize them and identify with them to the point where we begin to have trouble distinguishing them from us. Limitations, beliefs, roles, conditioning, all of these things were once ideas. Now, they have formed into a way of looking at the world, a perception filter that shapes how we see the very fabric of reality. Most of us view our potential, view ourselves and our lives through a very small, finite lens based on the conditioning we integrated into our identity. This has a lot less to do with what we believe we are capable of, but what we believe is possible for somebody like us. The deeper belief is not what is possible, but what is possible for us. The belief is in us. Who we believe ourselves to be shapes what we see as possible. We literally start to put ourselves in a box we never consciously chose. And here's the part that feels kind of backwards. When people feel stuck, the very thing that they go to for comfort that makes them feel safe, the thing they hold on to, their comfort zone, is actually the very thing that is keeping them stuck. Because the comfort zone is actually a clever disguise for fear. It is the zone that you think somebody like you belongs in. Somebody like you stays there. Once again, the fundamental limitation is not what we believe we're capable of, but who we believe we are that informs what we believe we are capable of. Maybe you believe you're unlovable. Maybe you believe you have to prove yourself. Maybe you believe you are very lovable. Maybe you have a great relationship with yourself. There are almost infinite numbers of ways that these combinations of beliefs and identifications can manifest in an individual person. But the long and the short of it is at the end of this whole process, there is a lens through which you now view the world. You see life through a certain way informed by who you believe yourself to be. And thus, instead of being trapped by external forces, the vast majority of people who feel stuck or out of place are unconsciously keeping themselves there, not out of actual stuckness, but out of fear. And now you might say, okay, Andrew, but come on, there are people who are actually stuck, who are in physical situations they cannot leave. I would say that that is true and that is terrible, but a lot of us think that that's where we are when it's not. And even if that is the case, In the great words of Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, the final freedom, when everything else is taken away, the last thing we retain is the ability to choose our response to our situations. That might sound like a Stoic saying that doesn't actually mean anything. You might think, well, come on, like, sure, but I have actual situations that bump me around in my life. I'm supposed to just choose to feel better? That very thought process reveals how so many of us are stuck not in the situation, but in our inability to choose our response. The situation which we do not control controls us. What we really want is to control ourselves. Therefore, if I cannot control how I feel innately, I have to manipulate the external world to make sure it fits whatever I would like it to in order for me to feel okay, in order for me to feel heard, seen, safe, whatever. I need to control. And so when we feel stuck, when we feel trapped, when we feel small and like we'd like to change but we don't know how, we can't do it, we often say things, or maybe you've heard people in your life say this, friends, family, I wish I could do that. If only I had the time, if only I had had that opportunity, if only I was different. I might say that I wish I had a better relationship with my partner or my mom, or I might say that I wish I could have gone on vacation, or I wish I could make this amount of money per year. Really, what I'm talking about is my perception, how I see the world and how I relate to the world. There's no fundamental reason that I could not have or do any of those things except for my belief that I fundamentally cannot do it. My story about my past shapes what I believe is possible about myself. No longer am I living life and receiving new information. Remember, when we're forming that box, we are constantly taking in actual experience. We might make some faulty conclusions, but the information itself that we bring in is fresh, it is alive, it is new. Over time, we start to filter more and more of that information through our preconceptions, through that little looking glass that we are seeing life through. Now, this is where the comfort zone comes in. And check this out. We very often in our society talk about how the unknown is scary. We talk about fear of the unknown. Well, change is difficult. Change is scary. Things we don't know are scary. Uncertainty is scary. I don't believe that any of those things are actually scary, and I'm going to tell you why. The unknown is never what we are actually afraid of. If I view myself as a fixed, finalized concept, I don't believe I can change, I don't think I'm very good at something, and you say, Andrew, why don't you go try that thing? The fear is not really of failure. The fear is not really of the unknown. The fear is not really about the thing. The fear is my ability from my current limited perspective, looking through that lens, I don't believe that I can cope with this new thing because my crystallized view of myself has forgotten that it can change. It has forgotten that it sort of built itself. Now, my comfort zone is the list of things I know I can do, or I am very certain that somebody like me is capable of achieving. The discomfort zone, on the contrary, is that part of life that is untested. Not that we cannot cope with, but that the old past version of me has not yet coped with. Typically, it's when things are new or when they run counter to our idea of ourselves. In other words, if you say, why don't you go give a public speech? And I say, I'm an introvert, I'm shy. That is a belief about myself. Maybe there are certain genetic personality markers, I don't know. But really, the biggest limitation on that person who identifies as an introvert and afraid of public speaking is the story they have about themselves. Whether that's people are going to judge me, I'm going to make a mistake, I don't want to be ridiculed, I don't want to be seen up there. Whatever it is, it's a story about me. Speaking, you can do all the time, but the psychological pressure applied by the situation in relationship with your story about yourself becomes the prison. Maybe a teacher asked us a question in class when we were like 8, and the whole class laughed at us or something. And now there's a psychological belief that says when you get up and talk, people laugh at you, and it feels bad, and it's gonna embarrass you, it's gonna hurt. Our limitations imposed by that prior concept make it so that we cannot easily go up there and be free. We are still bound by the chains of the past. Not, once again, real chains, but ideological chains built not in the task itself. It has really nothing to do with public speaking, but it has to do with our conceptions of who we are, our fears about ourselves, our identities, and what we think is possible for us. There is a memory now that is informing what you are capable of in the future, which means our future decisions end up an awful lot like our past experiences, which gives us an even stronger basis to make our future further decisions even more based on the past body of accumulated knowledge and ideas about ourselves. And that is the problem with the comfort zone. The comfort zone can introduce a self-fulfilling prophecy, a feedback loop, where the more we stay in the comfort zone, the more we stratify who we believe we are, which is where our comfort zone comes from. And we might subtly deviate every so often and try new things, but there are always going to be things that appeal to somebody like us. When it comes to feeling trapped in life, then, typically the things that trap us are things that feel uncomfortable for somebody like us. I can't go ask that person out. I can't go back to school. I don't know how I'm gonna make it work. I can't ask my boss for a raise. I can't have that hard conversation. I can't start my own business because it's not in my comfort zone. It's not in my identification-based story of what I believe is possible for somebody like me. People do all of those things all the time. It's a rare person who does all of those things completely free, but to differing degrees, each of us is slightly differently conditioned about these things. You might believe that you're fine in relationships, but have a hard time with money. You might be very wealthy, but have a hard time with relationships. It's not actually the event or the task at hand that poses the challenge. It is instead the underlying belief structure. And when we are so firmly identified with this past story, we begin to do ourselves and the people around us a great disservice because we continually experience life as if it is old. We experience everything through our lens of preconceptions. We see sort of what we expect to see, and we start to discount the very real, very ever-changing nature of life itself, which is sort of, ironically, uncertainty. We cannot, at least cognitively, understand really the essence of what we are, what it means to be human, what it means to be alive. These things are innately sort of undefined philosophical concepts or an actual lived experience that cannot be necessarily understood so much as embodied and lived. We start to entrap ourselves in mazes made out of words. We start to get stuck in our own heads because what we perceive as possible from our current vantage point is very, very, very different from what is possible full stop. What is possible at all is, of course, a vastly different situation than what I think is possible from my limited perspective. I might think I can make a YouTube video and put it up on the internet and maybe people will think it's cool. You might think that that's a terrifying idea. I once too thought that that was a terrifying kind of idea. But the only way that allowed me to shift that perspective was by changing the way I looked at myself and realizing I did not have to stay what I thought I was. In fact, I wasn't even what I thought I was. It was more the idea. The identification was the problem. You're not actually in the prison that you think you are. That's why I say you're not actually stuck, you're hiding. You're not intentionally hiding, so no shame. But if you're stuck in that comfort zone, really, if you feel stuck, it's because some part of you, maybe some deeper, essential part of your being wants to push out, right? Wants to expand. Wants to be something different, experience that flow, that connection with the changing nature of life. But the comfort zone comes in and says, no, that's not who you are. That's not what you do. That's not right for you. Don't try, stay who you are. Referring to the past. We stick in the past. We die, essentially. The past is over and dead, right? We repeat the same things over and over, clinging to the past because it seems to offer us a sort of security, while we also are subtly giving up on life. And is it any wonder that so many people, certainly not all, but so many people as they get older, they become more afraid, more brittle, because we are accumulating beliefs. We are stratifying ourselves and getting more and more stuck in an idea of ourselves. And after you've sunk 50 years into building this mental construct, is it any wonder that we are reluctant to give that up? Is it any wonder that people are afraid when you come and say, hey, I think you might be wrong? I've spent 50 years building up my entire being on those ideas being fundamentally right, and looking at that in the first place, let alone letting go of the ideas. But even looking at that process introduces a little bit of terror. It's hard to look at ourselves, and that is why the first step to overcoming this process is to just look at your life and see where you might be experiencing fear that is not real. That is to say, I'm sure your experience of fear is very real, but it's not coming from the thing. The fear is not about the public speaking, or the plane, or the relationship, or the finances. The fear is, how will I, my current small self, the past version of me, cope with this new situation? How will small me meet situation that is unknown? The fear is not the new. The fear is what I think I know about myself. What I think I have figured out. What I think is solid and stationary and reliable. That isn't. I am not actually limited by those past experiences. There may well be ups and downs, of course. I'm not saying you're going to perfectly succeed at everything you try, but even the idea of success and failure is sort of a conditioned belief. Do you succeed when you try something new? Do you succeed when you push yourself out of your comfort zone? Or do you only succeed when the whole world says, good job? Because if you only succeed when the whole world goes, good job, then you are a slave to the whole world, because the entire world has the ability to ruin your day, maybe your life, by saying, boo, didn't like that. So the very first thing is awareness, having the courage to just look at your life and say, where am I operating on faulty information? Where am I holding on to things that aren't true? Where am I keeping myself stuck? And what is the real source of these fears? When you're a kid, everything is so exciting, so gripping, so real, because it's all brand new. And the funny thing is that it's still all brand new. You are still brand new right now. Your whole life exists right now, and only right now. Where else is it? Your memories exist right now. You think of the past, that exists right now. But we build ourselves a cage out of concepts, out of ideas of who we are, and we try to keep that firm and solid and unchanging because it understandably seems to offer us a sense of security, because life is kind of challenging when things are moving up and down. Not that it's impossible, but that it causes us to consistently need to reevaluate what we think, what we believe, what we do. And so the more we can build ourselves that psychological security and saying, I am this way, the world is this way, the more we seem to establish security. But as soon as anything threatens that, as soon as you get a new coworker who's maybe a little bit better at the job than you are, you're going to feel insecure. As soon as your husband or wife says, hey, I think we need to make some changes in this relationship, maybe before they even say anything, you don't even know what they want, you're going to feel insecure. Because it's different, and we don't know how our old self is going to adapt to this new situation. We block out the new. We don't allow the new. We don't want the new. That once made life so magical as a little kid, so engaging, so full. We say, no, I don't want that. I want this idea, this old shell of beliefs and conditioning that I have identified with. I want this and only this and nothing else forever, please. That would be great. And in doing so, in holding so tightly to that system of beliefs, we imprison ourselves inside of ourselves. We see the world not as it is, but as we are. And the second step is to give yourself the permission. This is crucial. Once you have developed a little bit of awareness, once you've noticed these things in your life, to step into that insecurity, to step out and test, to see, oh, you know what? I won't actually die. If I give myself permission to rewrite success and failure so that success is internally conditioned. You succeed when you step forward bravely, not when the whole world claps, not when everybody says good job. No, because that is completely dependent on their conditioning, not yours. It is completely dependent on how they see the world and who they think they are. It honestly has nothing to do with you at all. Really, if you make something people like and they clap, that's all well and good. I don't have anything against helping people or being a good person, but what I am saying is that if you allow that to control what you believe you are capable of, who you believe you are, then you will forever be at the beck and call. Your self-worth will forever be at the whim of almost every other person on the planet. You will always have a hard time giving yourself permission, giving yourself the ability to step into new situations, to make new, harder decisions. Hard from the perspective that you haven't done it before, and you don't know how it's going to go. But in that action is the very catalyst of growth. That is what causes change to be such a good thing for people, because you have to shift from your old perspective. It is not where you go in life that matters, but it's the effect that that can have on you. It can shape and it can open your perspective. It can change the way you see the world. You don't necessarily have to travel very far. You don't necessarily have to do anything different, but it is how you see it and how you do it, and giving yourself the permission to be internally directed to say, I would like to do this for me. Not because everybody else is going to be happy, but because I want to challenge that inner fear, that inner voice that says, can't do it, not good enough, not smart enough. I'm not saying you have to do reckless things or irresponsible things. I'm not saying you have to go skydiving. But what I'm saying is there's that little voice inside of you that says, you should go tell that person how you feel. You should stick up for yourself. You should go pursue this passion. This is where your heart is. This is what resonates with you. This is you. And we so often snuff that little voice out when we listen to that old self, that fear-based, no, you can't do it, won't work, don't try. That comfort zone will ruin your life in the name of safety, insecurity. You might live a long life, but you will live a very shallow life. I think it's much more impactful to live a deep life, a full life, where you are there. You experience the things, you smell the smells, you taste the tastes, because you are present. You give yourself the ability to be there, not to be analytical, not to be sitting in the background comparing it to a pattern, a pre-existing concept, but to be present, to change, to be in touch with that flow of life. And the third thing, once you've developed some awareness, once you've begun giving yourself that permission to step into these discomfort zones, to challenge those beliefs, the third step is to begin to set up an intentional plan. Where do I want to go? Not where have the voices that have conditioned me wanted me to go for my whole life. Not what do I feel stuck by, what do I feel imprisoned by, but to look around and see where we would like to be, what we would like to experience, to establish. And then take a couple steps. Give ourselves permission. Stop waiting for people to come choose you, to say, hey, I choose you to unstuck. We must, sadly, but also empoweringly, we must unstuck ourselves. Because we're the ones, almost all of the time, that are keeping ourselves stuck. And I'm not gonna lie, this can be a little bit of a challenge because it does force you to face yourself, to look at those fears, and to become bigger than you think you are. Which means you have to go off script. And we do love to live our lives via script. But if you live via the old script, you will never experience the magic of the new stuff, the magic of reality, of experience itself. When we take things for granted, when we rely on the old patterns, all of a sudden it's just another day. It's just another park we're going to. It's just another person we're walking by on the street. And we forget that they are brand new, that we are brand new, that it is a new moment. And that experience is, in essence, as important as our idea of ourselves. That seems a ridiculous thing to say, but they're both just things bouncing around inside our heads. But we value one so strongly that it shapes the very way we see the world. We cling to security so tightly, and for what? Most of the time we cling to security, we become hardened, we become brittle, we become stuck. And we all eventually die anyway. Almost nothing that you're afraid of will actually kill you, and even if it would, you're still gonna die anyway. So what are you really saving yourself? Embarrassment? A little bit of discomfort? Discomfort from whose perspective? Embarrassment from whose perspective? It is embarrassment based on the story, the belief that I have to be this way, that I have to care what everybody thinks. I need this approval. Those beliefs, that identification, is the very bars and cell door of the prison that most of us are living in. And the freedom and the insecurity of stepping into that new space is that there is freedom in insecurity, because life is not secure. Nothing is for certain. You can't take anything for granted. And the more we take things for granted, the more we try to make everything a pattern, make everything a concept, to break it down into words and ideas, the more we lose the magic of real life, of living, of the fact that I'm talking to you right now through a complicated system of bits and gigabytes and wires and whatever, however the internet works, is ridiculous. But we never think about it, because we're too busy worrying about ourselves, worrying about how we're gonna make the next thing work. Not how the next thing is going to unfold, but how we, as viewed from our old self, are going to make it work for us. Our motive, of course, was also determined in the past. So we have our motive and our goals and our conclusions and everything we need to accomplish already set up. And is it any wonder that real life poses such a struggle? We feel so stuck. The most important thing is that you start to see this stuff. You start to just question yourself, question a little bit of the beliefs where you feel so stuck, and say, what is it really that's keeping me imprisoned here? Because I will tell you, the biggest thing in my entire life that has ever held me back, in fact, maybe the only thing, has been my idea of myself, what I allowed myself to do, try, and experience. Because everything else felt too foreign, too impossible, too hard, too whatever for me. And bit by bit, as I've let some of that fall away and gotten more comfortable with discomfort, more comfortable stepping into that unknown, because I realized that my true fear is the known. I need to be free from the known. Jiddu Krishnamurti has a great book called that. The more I have stepped into the fear, the more comfortable I have become in my own skin. But when I was so trapped, when I was so stuck in my own concepts, my own beliefs, my own limitations, nothing I did that I thought would help ever did. It was all more to reinforce. It was all to avoid, to hide, to stay hidden, rather than to embrace, to step boldly into the light of your own life and say, I'm here. Come at me. Let's see what happens. Let's see how this goes. That requires a lot of courage, and it might require a lot of letting go. If you'd like to go a little further into this, I do offer one-on-one coaching. You can find a link in the description, and I'm very happy to go over these things with people to examine their belief structures, their systems, and figure out where these limits come from and what is true versus what is false, and then come up with action plans and forward positive steps to embody that next phase that is intentionally designed, that is no longer a de facto way things are or the way I have to be, but instead is informed by what you feel you are passionate about, what is true for you. And if you want a couple videos that will teach you more about this process and more about this identification that keeps us stuck in our feelings of lack, insecurity, insecurity, then check out this video right here on letting go, the book and the method, and check out this video right here on your inner child, where the wounds to our inner childs come from and how we can begin to holistically heal ourselves and move forward. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.